Let me also bid good afternoon to the interpreters, technicians, and other staff in the courtroom, and make sure that everybody can hear me. Admiral Jokić, can you hear me?
Yes.
Bien, merci.
Very well, thank you. Let me also bid good afternoon to the public that is following our proceedings this afternoon. This is a preliminary phase of the proceedings, in particular initial appearance of Admiral Jokić, which is provided for in Rule 62 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence. Madam Registrar, would you please call the case?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Case number IT 0142I, the prosecutor versus Miodrag, Jokić, and others.
Merci. Je me tourne.
Thank you. Let me turn to the prosecution at this point. Mr. Tochilovsky, can we have the appearances for the prosecution, please? Microphone, please.
Microphone, please.
Tochilovsky, assisted by Mrs. Susan Grogan for the prosecution, Your Honor.
Très bien, merci.
Thank you. For the defense, can we have the appearances for the defense, sir?
Jones, and I represent the defendant.
Très bien.
Very well. Madam Registrar, are all documents of Mr. Jones in order?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ok, très bien, merci.
Very well, thank you.
Maître Alan Jones,
Mr. Jones, has Admiral Jokić received an indictment in a language that he understands?
He is familiar with it.
Microphone, please.
He's familiar with the indictment, and I have been through it and discussed it with him. Thank you.
oui, et donc avez-vous
Have you had an opportunity to explain to him the charges that have been brought against him?
I've discussed the indictment with him and the substance and outline of the charges.
Ok.
Very well, thank you very much, Mr. Jones. At this point, let me turn to Admiral Jokić, who is appearing today on the basis of the indictment that has been issued against him. Admiral, would you please stand up?
Pouvez-vous répondre?
I should now like to ask you several questions. First of all, would you please state your full name and surname for the record?
Poštovani sud,
Miodrag Jokić, Your Honor.
Date et lieu.
What is your date and place of birth, please?
25th of February, 1935. I was born in Mionica, near Valjevo.
Occupation avant de...
What was your profession or occupation before you came here?
bio sam oficir u penziji.
I was a retired officer.
Oh, very well. Your place of residence, please.
Belgrade.
Vous mariez?
Are you married?
Yes.
Enfants?
Do you have any children?
I have 2 daughters.
Ok.
Thank you. General Jokić, the proceedings today are your initial appearance before the tribunal. It is a formality, but a very important formality, during which your presence is required together with your defense counsel, because you will now be given an opportunity to hear the charges that have been brought against you by the Office of the Prosecutor. For the purposes of clarity, I am now going to ask Madam Registrar to remind us of the statutory provisions which grant you a certain number of rights. This will enable us to proceed to the main purpose of the present hearing. You may now sit down for the time being.
Madame la greffière,
Madam Registrar, would you please read Articles 20 and 21 of the statute and Rule 62 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence?
Article 20. Commencement and conduct of trial proceedings. The trial chambers shall ensure that a trial is fair and expeditious, and that proceedings are conducted in accordance with the rules of procedure and evidence, with full respect for the rights of the accused and due regard for the protection of victim and witnesses. 2. A person against whom an indictment has been confirmed shall, pursuant to an order or an arrest warrant of the International Tribunal, be taken into custody, immediately informed of the charges against him, and transferred to the International Tribunal. 3. The trial chamber shall read the indictment, satisfy itself that the rights of the accused are respected, confirm that the accused understands the indictment, and instruct the accused to enter a plea. The trial chamber shall then set the date for trial. 4. The hearing shall be public unless the trial chamber decides to close the proceedings in accordance with its rules of procedure and evidence. Article 21. The rights of the accused. 1. All persons shall be equal before the International Tribunal. 2. In the determination of charges against him, the accused shall be entitled to a fair and public hearing, subject to Article 22 of the statute. 3. The accused shall be presumed innocent until proved guilty, according to the provisions of the present statute. 4. In the determination of any charge against the accused pursuant to the present statute, the accused shall be entitled to the following minimum guarantees in full equality. A. To be informed promptly and in detail in a language which he understands of the nature and cause of the charge against him. To have adequate time and facilities for the preparation of his defense and to communicate with counsel of his own choosing. To be tried without undue delay. To be tried in his presence and to defend himself in person or through legal assistance of his own choosing. To be informed, if he does not have legal assistance, of this right, and to have legal assistance assigned to him in any case where the interests of justice so require, and without payment by him in any such case if he does not have sufficient means to pay for it. To examine or have examined the witnesses against him, and to obtain the attendance and examination of witnesses on his behalf under the same conditions as witnesses against him. To have the free assistance of an interpreter if he cannot understand or speak the language he used in the International Tribunal. Not to be compelled to testify against himself or to confess guilt. Rule 62. Initial appearance of accused. Upon transfer of an accused to the seat of the tribunal, the President shall forthwith assign the case to a trial chamber. The accused shall be brought before the trial chamber or a permanent judge thereof without delay, and shall be formally charged. The trial chamber or the judge shall satisfy itself, himself or herself, that the right of the accused to counsel is respected. Read or have the indictment read to the accused in the language the accused speaks and understands, and satisfy itself, himself or herself, that the accused understands the indictment. Inform the accused that within 30 days of the initial appearance, he or she will be called upon to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty on each count, but that should the accused so request, he or she may immediately enter a plea of guilty or not guilty on one or more counts. If the accused fails to enter a plea at the initial or any further appearance, enter a plea of not guilty on the accused's behalf. In case of a plea of not guilty, instruct the register to set a date for trial. In case of a plea of guilty, A, if before the trial chamber, act in accordance with Rule 62 bis, or B, if before a judge, refer the plea to the trial chamber so that it may act in accordance with Rule 62 bis. Instruct the register to set such other dates as appropriate.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam Registrar. Admiral Jokić, would you please stand up?
Admiraal Jokić, nous allons...
Admiral, we shall now proceed with the main formality of your initial appearance before the tribunal. We would like to hear your plea, whether you plead guilty or not guilty to the charges that have been brought against you. However, I first have to ask you several questions. Have you received the indictment in your own language?
I have.
Bien.
Have you understood the contents of the indictment?
I have, Your Honor.
Avez-vous
Have you had an opportunity to discuss the charges with your defense counsel?
I had, yes.
Are you ready today to enter a plea to the charges? Are you able to tell us whether you plead guilty or not guilty to each of the counts, or would you prefer to do so within the following 30 days?
Your Honour, we're quite content if the charges are put to Mr. Jokić today because he will be pleading not guilty to them.
Oui, de toute façon, maître.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones, for your assistance. However, I should like to hear the response from the accused. Let me repeat the question, Admiral. Are you ready today to enter a plea on the counts contained in the indictment?
I am, Your Honor.
Et
Very well, thank you. Are you going to enter a plea in respect of all of the counts of the indictment, or only for several of them?
Da, o svim tačno.
All of the counts.
okay, très bien.
Very well, please sit down.
Je me tourne maintenant vers maître.
Let me turn to Mr. Jones at this point. Mr. Jones, I suggest that we proceed as follows. Madam Registrar is going to read one portion of the indictment. That is only the paragraphs which pertain to the identity of Admiral and the relevant counts. When we reach the portion containing the counts themselves, I will ask Admiral whether he pleads guilty or not guilty. Do you agree with this procedure?
Ok, très bien, je vous remercie.
Very well, thank you very much. Madam Registrar, would you please read to us the indictment against the accused in accordance with the instructions that I have just given?
Case number IT 0142I, the prosecutor versus Miodrag, Jokić and others. Indictment. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, pursuant to her authority under Article 18 of the Statute of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, charges Miodrag, Jokić and others with grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions and violations of the laws or customs of war as set forth below. 2. Miodrag Jokić was born in 1935 in Mionica in the Valjevo municipality of present-day Serbia. He graduated from the Yugoslav Military Naval Academy and then served as an officer in various postings with the Yugoslav Navy. In December 1986, he was promoted to the rank of Rear Admiral. In December 1989, he was appointed as the Republican Secretary of National Defense of Serbia. In 1991, he was promoted to Vice Admiral and was named later in the year as the commander of the 9th Boka Kotorska Military Naval Sector, the 9th VPS. On 8 May 1992, he retired from the Yugoslav Navy. 6. Individual criminal responsibility. As commander of the JNA 9th VPS, Admiral Miodrag Jokić exercised both formal and de facto power over the land and naval forces under his command. 9. The various component forces of the JNA involved in the Dubrovnik campaign were organized into the 2nd Operational Group, which was formed from the headquarters of the Montenegrin Territorial Defense in Titograd, now Podgorica. 10. The primary components of the 2nd Operational Group were the 2nd Titograd Corps and the 9th VPS, augmented by Montenegrin Territorial Defense Forces. Altogether, these forces were comprised of approximately 20,000 to 35,000 troops. The commander of the 9th VPS was Admiral Miodrag Jokić. 11. As an officer in command functions in the JNA, Miodrag Jokić was bound by the regulations of the JNA as set out in the Strategy of Armed Conflict, the law on all people's defense, the law on service in the armed forces, the rules of service, and the regulations on the application of the international laws of war on the armed forces of the SFRY. These regulations governed the roles and responsibilities of JNA officers, set out their positions in the chain of command, and obligated those officers and their subordinates to observe the laws of war. 15. At all times relevant to this indictment, Miodrag Jokić and others were required to abide by the laws and customs of armed conflicts, including the Geneva Conventions of 1949 and the additional protocols thereto. 16. Miodrag Jokić and others are individually responsible for the crimes alleged against them in this indictment, pursuant to Article 7.1 of the Statute of the Tribunal. Individual criminal responsibility includes planning, instigating, ordering, committing, or otherwise aiding and abetting in the planning, preparation, or execution of any crimes referred to in the Articles 2 to 5 of the Statute of the Tribunal. 17. Miodrag Jokić and others, while holding the positions of superior authority as set out in the preceding paragraphs, are also criminally responsible for the acts of their subordinates, pursuant to Article 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal. A superior is responsible for the acts of his subordinate if he knew or had reason to know that his subordinate were about to commit such acts or had done so, and the superior failed to take the necessary and reasonable measures to prevent such acts or to punish the perpetrators thereof. Counts. 18. Between 1 October 1991 and 7 December 1991, Miodrag Jokić and others, acting individually or in concert with others, participated in the below-charged crimes in order to secure control of those areas of Croatia that were intended for inclusion in the so-called Dubrovnik Republic. It was the objective of the JNA and the Serbian and the Montenegrin governments to detach this area from Croatia and to annex it to Serbia, Montenegro, and other areas intended for Serb control in Croatia and Bosnia. 20. In order to achieve this objective, JNA forces under the command of Miodrag, Jokić and others launched an attack against the Dubrovnik region of Croatia from Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and from the Adriatic Sea. The forces under their command included regular JNA army, air and naval units, as well as territorial defense units from Montenegro, paramilitary units, and special police units that were subordinated to the JNA. The JNA forces, commanded by Miodrag, Jokić and others, launched the attack against the Dubrovnik region on 1 October 1991. The land attack was accompanied by the imposition of a blockade by the Yugoslav Navy. The JNA forces met little resistance from the lightly armed Croatian defense forces. The JNA seized territory to the southeast and northwest of the city of Dubrovnik and effectively surrounded the city itself within 2 weeks. Counts 1 to 9: murder, cruel treatment, attacks on civilians. 23. From 1 October 1991 and 6 December 1991, Miodrag, Jokić and others, acting individually or in concert with others, planned, instigated, ordered, committed or otherwise aided and abetted the killings of 43 civilians and the wounding of numerous others in and around the city of Dubrovnik through acts of unlawful shelling conducted by forces under their command. Included among these killed and wounded civilians are the victims of the attacks described in paragraphs 25, 26 and 27. The names of the deceased are set out in Schedule 1, which is attached to and made part of this indictment. 25. On 7 October 1991, JNA forces under command of Miodrag, Jokić and others shelled the town of Mokošica as a residential suburb of Dubrovnik. At the entrance to a civil defense shelter in Mokošica, 9 civilians were killed and numerous others were wounded by the JNA shelling. The names of the deceased are set out in Schedule 1, which is attached and made part of this indictment. By these acts and omissions, Miodrag, Jokić participated in Count 1, murder, a violation of the laws or customs of war as recognized by the Common Article 3.1a of the Geneva Conventions of 1949, punishable under Article 3 and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Admiral
Jokić, would you please stand?
Plaidez-vous coupable?
Do you plead guilty or not guilty for this count of the indictment, count 1?
Disagree.
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Très bien. Madame la greffière.
Very well, Madam Registrar.
A violation of the laws or customs of war as recognized by Common Article 3.1a of the Geneva Conventions of 1949, punishable under Articles 3 and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Admiral,
how do you plead, guilty or not guilty, to count number 2?
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Count 3. Attacks on civilians, a violation of the laws or customs of war as recognized by Article 51 of Additional Protocol 1 and Article 13 of Additional Protocol 2 to the Geneva Conventions of 1949, punishable under Articles 3 and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Admiral Jokić.
Admiral Jokić, do you plead guilty or not guilty to count number 3?
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Pouvez vous asseoir pour un instant?
You may now be seated, Admiral.
Continuez, s'il vous plaît.
Madam Registrar, would you please continue?
26. Between 9 and 12 November 1991, JNA forces under the command of Miodrag, Jokić and others unlawfully shelled all areas of the city of Dubrovnik. 10 civilians were killed and numerous others were wounded by the JNA shelling. The names of the deceased are set out in Schedule 1, which is attached to and made part of this indictment. By these acts and omissions, Miodrag Jokić participated in Count 4, murder, a violation of the laws or customs of war as recognized by Common Article 31A of the Geneva Conventions of 1949, punishable under Articles 3 and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Admiral, would you please stand? Do you plead guilty or not guilty for this count of the indictment, count number 4?
Nisam kriv.
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Count 5. Cruel treatment, a violation of the laws or customs of war as recognized by Common Article 3.1a of the Geneva Conventions of 1949, punishable under Articles 3 and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Admiral, do you plead guilty or not guilty to count number 5?
Nisam kriv.
Not guilty.
Count 6. Attacks on civilians, a violation of the laws or customs of war as recognized by Article 51 of Additional Protocol 1 and Article 13 of Additional Protocol 2 to the Geneva Conventions of 1949, punishable under Articles 3 and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Admiral Jokić, do you plead guilty or not guilty to count number 6?
Poštovani sude, nisam kriv.
Not guilty, Your Honor.
You may be seated now.
'27. On December 1991, JNA forces under the command of Miodrag Jokić and others unlawfully shelled all areas of the city of Dubrovnik. 14 civilians were killed and numerous others were wounded by the JNA shelling. The names of the deceased are set out in Schedule 1, which is attached to and made part of this indictment. By these acts and omissions, Miodrag Jokić participated in Count 7, murder, a violation of the laws or customs of war as recognized by Common Article 3.1a of the Geneva Conventions of 1949, punishable under Articles 3 and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Admiral, do you plead guilty or not guilty to count 7?
Poštovani sudija, nisam kriv.
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Count 8. Cruel treatment, a violation of the laws or customs of war as recognized by Common Article 3.1a of the Geneva Conventions of 1949, punishable under Articles 3 and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Admiral Jokić, do you plead guilty or not guilty to count 8?
Nisam kriv.
Not guilty.
Count 9. Attacks on civilians, a violation of the laws or customs of war as recognized by Article 51 of Additional Protocol 1 and Article 13 of Additional Protocol 2 to the Geneva Conventions of 1949, punishable under Articles 3, 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Admiral Jokić, do you plead guilty or not guilty to count 9?
Poštovani sudija, nisam kriv.
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may now be seated.
Counts 10 to 12. Unjustified devastation, unlawful attacks on civilian objects, destruction or willful damage to historic monuments and institutions dedicated to religion. 29. Between 1 October 1991 and 6 December 1991, Miodrag Jokić and others, acting individually or in concert with others, planned, instigated, ordered, committed or otherwise aided and abetted in the destruction or willful damage to dwellings and other buildings in the city of Dubrovnik. 30. The JNA positions on the high ground to the east and north of Dubrovnik provided them with an unobstructed view of the city and its environs. From these positions and from naval vessels offshore, the JNA forces under the command of Miodrag, Jokić and others engaged in unlawful shelling of civilian targets in Dubrovnik, including but not limited to the following attacks. The shelling on 23 to 24 October 1991 of the city of Dubrovnik, during which the old town area was targeted for the first time. The shelling on 8 to 13 November 1991 of the entire city of Dubrovnik, during which the old town, Lapad and Gruž were targeted. A number of buildings in the old town were damaged, as were hotels housing refugees and other civilian structures in other parts of the city. The shelling on 6 December 1991 of the entire city of Dubrovnik, but during which the old town area was specifically targeted. At least 6 buildings in the old town were destroyed in their entirety and hundreds more suffered damage. Hotels housing refugees and others civilians' structures were severely damaged or destroyed in other parts of Dubrovnik, but specifically in the Lapad and Babin Kuk areas. By these acts and omissions, Miodrag Jokić participated in Count 10, devastation not justified by military necessity, a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Articles 3b and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Admiraal,
Admiral, do you plead guilty or not guilty to count 10?
Poštovani sude, nisam kriv.
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Count 11. Unlawful attacks on civilian objects, a violation of the laws or customs of war as recognized by Article 52 of Additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions of 1949, punishable under Articles 3 and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Admiraal Jokić,
Admiral Jokić, do you plead guilty or not guilty for this count, count 11?
Sudio, nisam kriv.
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Count 12. Destruction or willful damage done to institutions dedicated to religion and to historic monuments, a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Articles 3d and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Admiraal Jokić, pleadez-vous?
Admiral Jokić, do you plead guilty or not guilty to count 12?
Poštovani sudio, nisam kriv.
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Vous asseoir pour un instant.
You may now be seated.
Counts 13 to 16. Extensive destruction and appropriation of property, wanton destruction of villages, destruction or willful damage done to institutions dedicated to education and religion, plunder of public or private property. 33. In October 1991, JNA forces, under the command of Miodrag, Jokić and others, seized and occupied Croatian territory in the proximity of the city of Dubrovnik. This part of the Dubrovnik region included, in whole or in part, the areas of Konavle, Župa, Dubrovačka, and Primorje. 35. After JNA forces occupied the areas surrounding Dubrovnik, troops under the command of Miodrag Jokić and others systematically plundered public, commercial and private property in the areas under their control. Much of this property was transported to Montenegro in JNA military vehicles, and the army thereafter instituted measures to track and maintain the looted property. JNA troops also systematically destroyed public, commercial and religious buildings as well as private dwellings in the areas around Dubrovnik. The destruction took place after the cessation of fighting, when the areas were securely under the control of the JNA. Villages in the occupied areas that were extensively damaged or were totally destroyed include, but are not limited to, Burgat, Čilipe, Dubravka, Gruda, Močići, Osojnik, Slano, and Cekovica. By these acts and omissions, Miodrag Jokić participated in Count 13. Extensive destruction and appropriation of property not justified by military necessity and carried out unlawfully and wantonly. A grave breach of the Geneva Conventions of 1949, punishable under Articles 2D and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Admiral, do you plead guilty or not guilty to count 13?
Sude, nisam kriv.
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Count 14. Wanton destruction of villages or devastation not justified by military necessity, a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Articles 3b and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Plaidez-vous coupable?
Do you plead guilty or not guilty to count 14?
Nisam kriv, poštovani sudija.
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Count 15. Destruction or willful damage done to institutions dedicated to education or religion, a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Articles 3d and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Plaidez-vous coupable?
Do you plead guilty or not guilty to count 15?
Kriv.
Not guilty.
Count 16. Plunder of public or private property, a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Articles 3e, 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Plaidez-vous coupable?
Do you plead guilty or not guilty to count 16?
Sude, nisam kriv.
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Pouvez-vous asseoir?
You may now sit down, Admiral.
Bien, nous avons noté
Very well. We have noted that Admiral Jokić has entered a plea of not guilty to all of the counts in the indictment. Madam Registrar, for the record, please note that Admiral Jokić has pled not guilty to all of the counts contained in the indictment. Let me now turn to the prosecutor in order to remind us of certain elements of the present procedure. As regards provisions of Rule 66 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence, production of evidence, have you already taken appropriate steps, Mr. Tochilovsky, and what is the situation in general with this aspect of the procedure, please?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution submitted more than 900 pages of supporting materials for translation on 4th October, more than a month ago. And as we were told by translation unit, it's due on 24th November. So we expect the translation of those supporting material within 2 weeks. But we already provided the defense today, prior to this commencement of this initial appearance. We provided the defense with English, the copies of the supporting materials in English, so they can start working with these materials, and as soon as we got those materials from the translation unit translated into BCS, it will be provided to the defense.
Très bien, Maître Tos.
Very well, Mr. Tochilovsky. Thank you very much. Let me turn to the defense now. Mr. Jones, as you know, in keeping with Rule 72, preliminary motions must be submitted in writing within a period of 30 days after disclosure by the prosecutor to the defense of all material and statements referred to in Rule 66. As we have just heard from Mr. Tochilovsky, we know that you haven't yet received all of the documents. However, for the purposes of good organization of our work, Mr. Jones, are you in a position to tell us today if you intend, as defense counsel for Admiral Jokić, to file any preliminary motions, and if so, what kind of motions you intend to submit, if you can tell us at this point?
Thank you very much.
Microphone, please.
I wish to emphasize.
Micro.
I wish to emphasize, thank you, Your Honour, that Admiral Jokić has voluntarily attended The Hague. He has submitted himself to the jurisdiction of this tribunal in order to present his defence vigorously, I hope, through his lawyers in due course. And I do wish to emphasize today, Your Honour, that because he is here voluntarily, that we do intend, as soon as possible, as soon as reasonably possible, to present an application for his provisional release so that he can be restored to Serbia pending future hearings of the tribunal, both the full hearing and any necessary preliminary applications there should be. He's very anxious to return to Serbia. Having learnt about the indictment in this case only last month, well, of course, there's a great deal that he has to do in his home country by way of preparation for his defence. So that application for provisional release will be made by us as soon as we can do so, and as soon as I've had an opportunity of reading the preliminary bundle of evidence with which I've been provided by the prosecution today.
Très bien, Maître.
Very well. Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. For the purposes of Rule 65 ter A, as regards the appointment of a pre-trial judge, this chamber cannot do anything about it at this point in time because, as you are all aware, this trial chamber will complete its mandate on the 16th. So it is a matter that will have to be dealt with by the chamber, which will be eventually seized of the case. So we will leave this to the chamber, which will eventually be appointed to try this case. The pre-trial judge or the trial chamber will then fix a date for a status conference in this case. So I think that for the time being, there is nothing else that we can do. All I can do at this point is to give the floor once again to Admiral Jokić. Admiral, would you please stand? I should like to give you an opportunity at this point to tell us anything you wish to raise regarding the conditions of your detention and also the conditions of your health.
Ja sam zdrav.
Your Honor, I am healthy. and do not have any particular complaints concerning my accommodation in the detention unit.
Très bien, donc vous pouvez vous...
Very well, you may be seated, Admiral. Thank you very much. For the reasons that I have indicated, there is nothing else that we can do today, so the hearing stands adjourned.